Okay, we're live. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Excited to have Rocky Garza on the show today from rockygarza.com. Rocky's a leadership coach, inspirational speaker. I had a chance to check in and see his his presentation at the AIM conference in Huntington Beach, where he completely wowed the crowd. And I'll show you my blank version here of rediscovering you. And the really cool part is you end up with a personal belief statement. I thought that was a really slick way to kind of like find value in 120 minutes and deliver something that everyone can take away. I know that after the presentation, there was a ton of chit chat around the conversation that you put forward in terms of challenging everyone, making everyone from believe around, their unique identifiers, what they're really good at, how can they begin to change the world and on their terms. So in terms of getting to hell yes, one of the things that's really special about getting to hell yes is knowing who you are and the problems that you solve and what you're up to. Personal belief statements are a very interesting process to go through because you get to understand a little bit around why you're on this earth, what makes you tick, and what you're striving to achieve within your life. And I think it's such an important part to understand because the context of getting to hell yes, it really is about alignment, not only in your customers' goals or your prospects' goals, but also alignment with your own goals and what you're seeking to achieve, especially when people feel sometimes that they're suffering through periods of discomfort or maybe even call that growth. So like anytime anybody has any questions, please ask any questions throughout. It's always much more exciting. This is brought to you by IRCX. We're our AI-powered remote maintenance software for the property management industry to help you know before you go, so you can save trips and maybe solve some of the problems around triage, trips, and maintenance tax resources. So we are thrilled to get going here. Rocky, again, thank you much for being a guest. And as we always start out, a little bit of background about yourself, how you got into this role as a leadership coach, because every leadership coach discussion is a unique discussion.
Yeah.
And let's dig in on the problem that you solve.
Yeah. Well, number one, I so appreciate you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. It was great to meet you when we were at AIM together. And I feel like we like talked for 2 minutes and we were like, yeah, we're for sure. Like a knew from the beginning. It was like the opening reception and we just happened to run into each other. So I'm grateful for that. I've been I would say I've been in the people business specifically like this for about the last decade or so. The decade prior to that, I was in the people business. I was in the camping world for a while, like summer camp for kids. I was in the ministry space and worked at a church for a while. Sort of my entrepreneur journey started 15 or 16 years ago. And then really over the last decade and the decade plus has really been of saying, okay, how do I help organizations find ways to really fix the people problem that is slowing things down, but without sort of blowing everything up, right? How do we really have the right person in the right seat at the right time to get to the place that we want to go? And so I think though, for me, the value I think that I've been able to find in doing so, whether that's from the stage, like we experienced at AIM, and you've got 800 people who are going to give you 60 or 90 minutes of their time to just really be focused in, sort of this mantra I've had is my job is not to tell you what a great leader looks like. My job is to help you see what you look like as a great leader. And I think for me, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to development, I think when it comes to solving problems, I think pick a category. When it comes to raising our children, our families, or our partnerships, or our marriages, whatever it is, I think we tend to try to solve problems by looking at an external standard that we believe if we could achieve, then we would get it right. If I could just get the objections exactly right, then everyone would say yes to me, except that doesn't work. Because your capacity to answer an objection specifically and uniquely to you is the only thing that will solve that objection, not doing what so-and-so said online we should do, which were the 3 easy steps to always getting a yes. That's not how life works. That's not how leadership works. I don't think that's how organizational growth works. So I think for me is, I work with executives and executive teams to really help fix people problems that are slowing things down, right? Get clear on who they are, align with their teams, and really move people in the right roles, really without blowing things up that are already working. And so some of it we call coaching, some of it we call consulting, some of it we call speaking. I would say really my job is to it's embedding, it's advising, it's sort of building leadership systems that actually stick because they're based on the unique capabilities of who the individuals are, both from the C-suite all the way to our brand new manager. Our capacity to understand ourselves, I think, gives way to my ability to recognize what is the overall mission and how do I find myself getting there.
Why does this problem exist? I had someone on last week and we dug into this a little bit more, but what's your perspective? Why does this exist and why does it exist? We know all about it. Why does it persist?
Yeah, I think number one is because we're humans. And I don't think it's ever going to go away, because the problem we're solving is human.
Yeah.
The inability for us to either recognize self enough to have full awareness of how I am being seen, perceived, known by those around me, and simultaneously solving the people problem that is when you get a group of people together towards a singular mission. I think from a human perspective, somebody wants to be in charge. Somebody wants to be told what to do. Somebody wants to have a good, meaningful role. And normally most of us think it's all of our job to be the one who is the boss. And most of us don't think it's our job to be the one to put in the activity. So I don't care if it's at work. Pick anywhere. Pick any place on what TV shows. Why was the show Lost? For those of you that ever watched it, if maybe you're too young and you didn't see it, but I think if you're watching this, you probably did see it. If that's the case, like, why was that so fascinating? Because it was a human dynamic of every person fighting for the role they thought they were supposed to have, rather than maintaining the role that they were actually uniquely and made designed for, which probably would have gotten them off the island, but they didn't. Why? Because they were an organization like the rest of us. They were all vying to do the thing they thought they were supposed to be doing because that would make them good. Rather than, what if we just inverse that? If I identified the thing that made me good and unique and I did more of that, would I find myself more satisfied? So I think the problem exists because we're human, because we're always vying for this next thing that we think we're supposed to do. And I think it persists because most organizations don't take the time to really invest in the clarity of who people are, the ability to give them a role that is equipped to our direct mission, and doing so enough because the metrics we tend to use to drive success are almost exclusively based on the performance, not the activity. And they're based on our ability to generate a revenue. And I want to be clear. I like revenue. I think businesses exist for what purpose? To make money so we can all have a job. I get that. I'm very clear for those of you that listen to this and you're like, oh, he's one of those guys. No, I like money. I like revenue. But revenue costs something. And oftentimes it comes at the expense of our people, because we're not willing to make that kind of investment. And so we think we have this up into the right trajectory that is perpetual and it must be aggressive. And the more up and right and the more aggressive, the better we are. Except I think companies that have been around a really, really long time, who do things really, really well, not perfect, but well, recognize that up and to the right is possible in the macro, and that the incline by which it's there, I think the higher the incline, the greater the cost to people. And that's not data, by the way. I'm not Harvard. I didn't do a Gallup study. I'm just giving my perspective on how I have interacted with businesses over the last decade. So I think it exists because we're human. I think it persists because we have unrealistic expectations about how we're supposed to get there, even though we would never expect our 4-year-old to learn to drive by 6 and get a license by 7 and go to college by 9, because that's dumb. That we wouldn't do that. Yeah. But we absolutely will do that with a new leader and a new manager who is ill-equipped, because we think that we're doing them a favor. But a 7-year-old driving is not a favor. It's only catastrophic for everyone. And I think the same thing is true in business.
So do you think that's the case of, like, so that to play it back, right? So as someone who's hired people and had to X people and who have been exited myself, like, is it a case of, like, so you're speaking it from the supply side, at the self side. Now, from the demand side of the equation, those seeking to fill those seats on the bus, is it a case that we are bad at, like, what is creating the mismatch between the unique abilities of self and the unique requirements of the organization?
Yeah.
How can that get mismatched so that this tends to persist?
Yeah. So I think we have the capability and capacity. Those are two different words, but I'm going to use them interchangeably. So we have the individual, and this could be a new manager. This could be CEO. I don't care about the position. This is the human. Every human has a capacity and a capability of today. Let's go present stamp on timestamp. Typically, the organization also has an expectation. Sometimes we call those goals. Sometimes we call them uncommunicated expectations. You can make the judgment for yourself which one your organization is. We have this. The space between capacity and capability and expectation. When unaddressed, nothing productive or proactive is put inside there. The only thing that exists between capacity and expectation is disappointment.
One more time.
The only thing that exists, I'm going to give a personal example because I think I relate personally and it relates professionally.
All right.
My ability to know myself and to be able to be vulnerable, to be emotionally aware, and to communicate eloquently with my wife.
Okay.
My wife's expectation about what I should be able to do in our marriage to make her feel seen, known, and loved. The space between my real, true capacity, not my arrogance, my real ability, and her expectation. The only thing that lives between those two areas is going to be her disappointment.
And is this because, like, you didn't, I'm just sorry, I don't want to dig in on this, but like to carry the metaphor forward, is it expectations that you set, or is it expectations that she came to on her own because of other things around her?
I think typically it is expectations that were theoretically set that we're supposed to achieve. And because I'm not doing the thing that she thinks I'm supposed to be doing, whether she wants it or not, we haven't even got there yet. That would be called quarterly goals and assessments to see how we get to a greater picture. There's not a vision. It's just an expectation. Leaders should do this. Managers should do this. Salespeople should do this. Says who? Yep, the salespeople. That's who said it. It should be done. And so I think that's why there's systems like Rockefeller habits. There's systems like the EOS system and traction.
Well,
Why do those systems exist? Those systems exist because what they do is they provide a framework of realistic expectation where all of my activity and my capacity and capability, what do they say? Right person, right seat, right time. Why? So that there's a through line between the right person, the right seat, and the right time, and what our overall annual 3-year, 10-year picture is of our business, so that I can see that there's a gap between their capacity and the expectation. Therefore, what do we do to close that gap? We would traditionally call that leadership development, professional development. Go to John Maxwell's leadership school. Go to accept. I think all those are valuable, by the way. I have a leadership program as well, so I would be foolish to say I think that's not beneficial. I think it is beneficial. However, I think what we're doing is we're sort of telling people that, hey, stop coughing. And so what we do is we send them to the school to learn how to create cough drops. Now, I have a cough that's detrimental to this business. So you sent me to the school to learn how to make cough drops so that I could have cough drops easier so I wouldn't cough as much.
Rather than solving the problem.
Does anybody ask me why I'm coughing?
Yeah.
Does anybody recognize that we're all coughing because it's hazy in here because our filtration system? We don't need to get in crazy. We're 9 metaphors in at this point, so we should stop. But I think that's where we get into both. So personally, professionally, maritally, partnerships, relationships, any of those things. I think that's why I have this deep passion, this deep focus for going, let's start with the individual. Because if I can't get the individual to recognize, hey, I don't know what my capacity or capability even is. Why does DISC assessment, culture index, why do all those things exist? Because we're looking for a baseline. We're looking for a language we can all speak to go, now I know why on culture index, your detail is off the charts the other direction. That's me, by the way. I'm talking about myself. I could care less, right? For those of you that are culture index fans, I'm a what they call a widespread rainmaker. That's my title. And that means my drive and desire is here. And then my detail is here, and they couldn't be further. They're actually 9.5 points apart. So all my culture index fans, you'll know what that means. And right now you're thinking, how is this guy even alive? I don't know. There's a gap between my capacity and the expectation that's needed to run a business. But the ability that means now I know where to fill the gaps. I do got to have the right person in the right seat, or Rocky fails because he's not capable on his own. So we create this individualistic idea. To be a leader, you got to have it all together. You're not allowed to ask for help. You definitely don't say, I don't know. You got to figure out what it is all by yourself. And your capacity is not as high as it needs to be, but we're not going to give you any formal training to figure it out, except that we sent you to the cough drop factory and you came back. And if you can't make those in your spare time, sorry about you. And so we wonder why we wrestle with this human tension of the speed by which we create false expectations to achieve something that we may not even actually want. All in the spirit of growth and drive and revenue. And I like all those things.
But is that where, so like in terms of the people part, like closing that gap, there can be either, a clearer explanation of what's required so that expectations are set, or the inverse, which is kind of like because, and I'll say my weakness, I have a very, especially in a fast growing company, I don't know what those requirements are. I can kind of guess, but it's a best guess at best. And so is that why when you look at like EOS as an example, and they talk about people, there's like the get it, want it, and then the capacity conversation, right? Because like get it, want it being binary, and then like, do they understand the problem? Do they get the problem? Do they want the challenge? And then ultimately they have the capacity to learn so they can actually do it. And the binary ones on a higher basis is the get it and the want it. Capacity piece is like, okay, I can teach that. They're gonna have to learn that. Because if you don't get it, want it, then you can never seek to achieve to close that gap, and it's still on the person. It's not in the organization. Is that like, I mean,
Yep.
I get where you're coming from, because you're coming from you're addressing the gap. And the
That's
gap,
right.
in EOS, they call it get it, want it. And the get it, want it drives you to close that gap. And then, but what I'm hearing from you also is that like, there's also accountability on both ends of it. If you're unable to articulate what the requirements are, and can we get better at that so that it can actually, or even be, maybe I would even go even further. It's not articulation of the requirements. It's a mindfulness of what the requirements are. That is probably,
I mean, I would, yeah. And I would even say, I would go as far to you and say, I think oftentimes it is an articulation of the requirements. We're really good about putting the about page on our website that we think communicates who we are, but we've never asked our employees to read it or remind them of what that is. So we create this external message to go, hey, this is us. But nothing about what I'm asked to do on a daily basis is remotely related to who we say we are as a company. But one of our tenets is to bring your whole self to work. What? I can't bring my whole self to work. You asked me to show up and do something different than we say we do organizationally every day.
Yeah.
So,
And that
right
part there, I've lived that tension. And
I think that's to me, that's the beauty of really putting the kind of work that I'm passionate about is going, I care as much about your mission, vision, and values of your organization and our capacity to create a beautiful narrative that really humanly describes what we're passionate about, what we're doing, and every one of your employees being able to do the same thing about themselves. And if we can have the clarity here, now I can begin to find this through line between who we are as an organization and why I decided I want to show up here 8 hours a day, every day, and who I am as an individual and what I want my life to be about. And guess what? And now I have clear roles and responsibilities. Now I know how my success is being measured. It actually is being measured of something I can control rather than you telling me I didn't hit a goal that, by the way, I had no control over anyway. I was just a task rabbit in it, but now I'm going to be penalized and I don't get a bonus because so-and-so didn't do their job, even though I was on their team. That seems unfair. So we start to fill in all these very operational gaps. I think though, what happens is often we do it inversely. So we go, there's a problem and we go, let's get into the system and fix the operation. All right. The systems are all go. They make perfect sense. Who's going to do them? I guess Rocky is, because he's in that department. Rocky didn't build the system. Rocky didn't build the operation. Rocky just told a new thing to do. And so I think they're both valuable.
Rocky's not good at solving that problem.
Maybe Rocky actually doesn't care.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. So if you don't solve this problem, and I've been there as well, for a leader perspective, like in terms of like the return on investment, like you hear it's not unusual, or at least the expressions, I'm surrounded by idiots or whatever. But like if you don't, or I have to micromanage or things go wrong. If you don't do this correctly, you're unable to free yourself from the obligations of other people's jobs, because you're destined to micromanage. You're destined to create a toxic culture, because you're ultimately kind of like leading them around the room without giving them clarity around the destination. And it's frustrating.
And so, okay. I love this so much, because now let's take it one step further so we can sort of people who are going, I hear what you're saying. But so what we do is then we Band-Aid it and we go, you know what? Let's do a workshop on delegation. Let's teach our leaders how to delegate. Okay. I'm a both things are almost always true all the time. So I try never to be a throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of guy. I agree. Delegation is a beautiful tool. It is a great way to get things out to people who can own them. But to go from your point is that I'm walking my team in circles because I refuse to give a clear message, a clear vision, and give people the kind of autonomy required to be an adult and show up and do their job. So we say, you know what our company needs? Our problem is we don't delegate enough. Let's do a workshop on delegation. So what our employees hear is, why don't you start just giving tasks away to people? Trust that they're going to do it. No system, no accountability, no measurement for success. Just start delegating. You'll be a great leader. You know what the best leaders do? Great leaders delegate. Great leaders give their team new tasks. Okay. So now we pass off a bunch of tasks to people who are ill-equipped, not ready, low capacity, no measurement for success, and no training at all. We have 30 days. It's okay. 60 days. What's happening? We get to the next quarter. It's falling apart. See, I knew it. They're all idiots. None of them know how to do the thing that I needed them to do my way. That's because we never equipped them to do the thing we needed their way so that you wouldn't have to do it your way so that you could go do your job. I know it's slower. I know there's more pieces. I know that I love to muddy the water to go, hey, I think you missed this part. But I think that's where all the good, real work happens. So I love taking executives. We have a thing called team identity mapping. And so it's a full day. I was in LA a couple weeks ago with a team from the LA Rams. They had 16 of their executives. We spent 9 hours together, okay, in a room. Great location, by the way, in Malibu. It was awesome. But we spent 9 hours together going through and creating the personal beliefs you statement. It was like the that on steroids. What do I think and where am I at and what do I believe and why does it matter? And I had it, and they said to me, number one, pro sports doesn't do this. All of them said I've a tenure across the room. They've been in pro sports for 10 plus years, majority of people. In 10 plus years, I've never done this exercise because in pro sports, typically this doesn't matter. Number two, I have never been able to see my team as clearly as I can see them now. And I now know exactly why they have been failing where they've been failing and why they tend to be successful at things I didn't even ask them to be. Right? The verbatim from, she said, I have it written down here. She said, this team experience enabled me to create lasting cohesion amongst my leaders in a period of time that would have been impossible without this exercise. We are the most aligned we have ever been. You know what we didn't talk about? The Rams. You know what we didn't talk about? Revenue. You know what we didn't talk about? Partnerships and sales and how we're going to drive additional partnerships and tickets and sponsorships. You know why? Because that's our job. And I've got a decade of experience selling partnerships. I think I can do that, but I can't do it very well on this team because I'm not aligned. There's not cohesion. I don't even know what it is we're trying to do other than beat the other person on my team. That's not motivating for most of us. A few of us have the kind of competition to go, I know what our motivation is, winning. And there are a few of us out there, and we typically say those are the unicorns of sales. No, they just happen to be competitive, and their natural skills lend themselves to not caring about anybody else as much as they care about themselves in the most positive way possible.
Well, I think a challenger sales, those are actually bad. Those are they're typically not very scalable sales organizations. So you got your wildcat salesperson, and they may or may not be able to. You just can't reproduce it. So now you're constantly beholden to their demands because they are the wildcat salesperson. So I have a question. Using the Rams example, this is for people that are listening that are looking to solve something. Like, why did the Rams choose this choice? The choice of you is let's just kind of they could have done nothing. They could have all read a book. They could have handed out Bill Walsh's "The Score Takes Care of Itself." Everyone looked at some pyramids from what's his name, basketball coach from UCLA. They could talk about Pete Carroll's book around Win Forever. And then everyone said they read the books, they do a book club and they call it a day, but they chose to go for Rocky, right? And they chose to invest 9 hours in, and we're not too far off from the season, right? And so what was going on, and not so much about the Rams, but why did they decide now we're going to invest in this sort of thing?
Yeah. So I'll give a couple of things. Number one, and some of you will roll your eyes, but if you roll your eyes, then you're welcome. Because as cliche as it is, to get a result you've never gotten, you got to do something you've never done.
Ooh.
It's not lost on me that every person who's been in pro sports for 20 plus years afterward, and they don't have to say this to be nice, like, right? They have free drinks. We're at a great place in Malibu. The bar is open. We're done. They did their thing. Nobody has to say anything to me.
Yeah.
But when you have multiple people, and it happens to me from the stage as well, and I want to be very clear, this is a statement about the work we are doing. This is not a statement about Rocky Garza, the human being. Okay. So for those of you that are like, calm down, Rocky, just stay with me here. I have been in this business for 20 years. I have been to countless workshops, retreats, QBRs, and events. I have never once left an event as reflective on myself and as clear about who I am and what my team needs than I am today. So I take that and go, you know why? Because you did something you've never done to get a result you haven't yet gotten. And I think the Rams chose that because they have all the right players, no pun intended. On the team we worked with, they have the right players. Their leaders are great. Their people leaders are great. Their mission and they love the Ram. I mean, they love what they are doing and they're very good at it. So I think they recognized, maybe not backwards, because I don't want to make that. Don't hear backwards as negative. But maybe they recognized that we've been going about it the wrong direction. We want the same result, but maybe by focusing again on our sales calls and our leads and our all great things, a good CRM tool and who's doing what and cross promotions and spiffs and all the things that come along with sales, all great things. I love all those things. Why does our team not feel like they are willing to be aligned towards a singular goal and there is so much conflict? I would venture to say, as simple as it's going to sound, because your team does not know one another. There's a level of trust that they don't have in themselves, which always translates to a lack of trust with your team. That's why I try to always start. I want to start at the top. I mean, speaking at an event is great, but after we speak at the event of your company, then get me in a room with your executive leaders. Why?
Yeah.
Because if you guys are not getting along and you're not clear on what you're doing, good freaking luck, because ain't nobody else going to be aligned either. So I think the Rams are going, and other organizations that we do this with are saying, okay, we can either do the thing we've always done. Let's go in our QBR. Let's get a speaker to come and make us feel good. We'll do it ourselves. We don't need anybody from the outside. We know nobody knows our business like we do. I agree. I agree. Nobody can look at the things you're used to looking at like you can.
Right. Now, do you find on the topic of workforce trust, like in that, like the Rams are all, so actually first question. So in this case, we're talking about the organizational performance, revenue driven, not the championships. I realize they're related, but I mean, this is the revenue organization for the Rams.
Yes, correct.
So we can save the comments on the quarterback they should sign, or the linebacker.
That's right.
Right. So it's almost like the Dallas Cowboys, all due respect. They're a high revenue organization and they have made the championships they haven't won a playoff game in probably 20 years.
Yep.
Right. And so if you were talking to that revenue organization, it's independent of the performance in the field. It's about the conversation about the corp. And so for everyone to be performance about the corp, there's got to be an understanding of who you know, because there's a lot of science and books about the team, the performance in the field, but we're talking about the performance of the corp. And you're highlighting that the performance of the corp, in order for them to really understand each other or to excel, and I'll say to outperform relative to their peer group, relative to other corps. Every dollar could be invested somewhere else. And so for that investment dollar, that needs to provide a return. And so,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go keep going.
I just think I'm going to ruffle both of our feathers. And I'm going to say what we're doing on the corp side, I think is, and I hope somebody sees this and someday they hire me so that I can come back and we'll do this again. And we'll be like, you see, dude, we were right. Okay. I guarantee you, I don't know who the worst team in the NFL was last year, whoever it was, probably the Carolina Panthers. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm just going to say that. Okay. Just if it's not you, if you're a Panthers fan, I'm sorry. I'm just choosing a team that I know. The Cowboys suck. If you were to look at the cohesion of the human of the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Dallas Cowboys, I can guarantee you that inside the locker room or the boardroom, you pick, the Eagles organization understands who their teammates are, what they value, what they bring, and they are asking them to do the thing only they can do in a way that we can collectively drive in a direction that only we can go. In a way that I can guarantee you, as somebody who just watches peripherally, inside the locker room of the Cowboys is not the case. Yeah. You've got a bunch of heroes. You got a bunch of people that are trying to make good on their contracts. They get paid a lot of money and they're tired of seeing themselves on Twitter getting blasted. You've got, how many more social posts I saw about positivity and growth and teamwork from the Eagles than I saw posts about the Cowboys? So let me ask the proverbial question for all of us then. Let's assume that your team, your company, your leadership team is in fact a team. Do your team's messages, your Slack messages, and your DMs look more like the Eagles or look more like the Cowboys if I could get a picture of what your team is saying about themselves on the inside.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess the challenge to all this is that it's kind of like uh, I'm always curious about the people part of the problem, and it's well acknowledged the people. You go back to some of the earliest sales books, right? It's like Zig Ziglar. You develop the people run or build the people build a business. Again, it goes on and on and on and on, and acknowledging the role of people to drive the bus. But it still is an icky conversation to have. It is an uncomfortable acknowledgement. When you're a leader and you've got to call in somebody, it feels like that job is, my job or the leader's job to acknowledge. And then when they're seeking to solve that problem, it's an acknowledgement around the gap that they may have. And number one. And number two, it's one of those problems that doesn't show up in the quarter. It shows up over time, right? Like you hear about toxic cultures, read about toxic cultures, and like it's not something that happened now, or maybe it's in pursuit of the quarter that created the organizational structure or the organizational feel.
The riff, whatever the riff is.
Or just culture, I guess. There is a culture around how they work together, and like there's so much reward and recognition given to achieving the objective on a quarterly basis, come hell or high water. Like, and we cite the GE model of cut the bottom 10%. We cite all these different things. But then ultimately, like the long-standing results come from what you're just describing. But it either takes an external force or just, I don't know, a willingness to look at the world a different way. We had John Carlson on from Mark Taylor last week, and he was talking a ton about culture, values, and the alignment of people. And they've got a better retention rate on their residents and on their people, right?
Yeah.
But it's really difficult as a leader who maybe be quantitatively oriented or to just to believe in that outcome, because you never know. It's very little. It's like some of those things like, I don't know what good culture is, but I know what bad culture looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you drive that attribution to the result from that kind of alignment?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I would say culture is not what you pontificate. Culture is what you tolerate.
Sure, you got to hire on skill, fire on
right. Like I don't care what you say your company stands for. I will know what your company stands for based on the level of activity that you tolerate. And when I say tolerate, I'm talking about the highest level of toleration. I'm not talking about lowest expectation. I'm not talking about the lowest common denominator. I'm saying the culture of your business is based on the kind of activity, the behavior you tolerate. Do you only tolerate a behavior of excellence? And again, is excellence driven by a singular revenue number, or is excellence driven by the mission, vision, values of our organization? Well, the guy you just mentioned, I'm all on that team. But I think that does take time. That does take effort. Why does EOS say that you should go away if you've never created a VTO? You should go spend 2 or 3 days uninterrupted doing it, because it takes that long. 3 days uninterrupted? Are you kidding? When's the last time an executive team spent 3 days uninterrupted just thinking about who they were? They don't, because we're wasting time. We're not making money, or all the other things that we would say. So I think for our ability to say, if your driver, if the sole purpose of what you do and exist, and I don't mean this sarcastically, I mean this very literally, is growth and is revenue, and at all costs, we're just looking for revenue growth, just say that. Just let me know that that's what I'm getting myself into, and I'll just know that I've got 6 to 18 months here, and I'm probably going to move on, and you're going to have high attrition, you're going to have low retention, you're going to have high turnover, but you're going to make a shitload of money. Mm-hmm. Look at the Dallas, go back. The Dallas Cowboys are a perfect example that you can have a very profitable business and a very crappy company. Mm-hmm. Those things can exist at the same time. Mm-hmm. The Dallas Cowboys are the single most profitable sports organization in the world.
I think so. Relative, at least certainly, I don't know that. Yeah.
I saw a statistic, at least relative to in America.
Yeah.
And they were, I think it was 4X the Rams, who were number 2.
Wow.
That's the gap. So they are singularly
like 25 years.
The most profitable business.
Yeah.
And potentially, if we're talking about performance of our team, one of the worst.
Yeah.
So I want to be very clear for those of you that are not into sports, or it's not a sports thing, or you have your own business, or you're a part of a team, or you're an executive listening. I want to be clear. You can have a very profitable business and a very crappy company. Just say that though. Just let me know what your focus is.
So let's just follow this for a second, and we are going to get shredded by Cowboys fans, and that's okay.
It's fine. It's fine.
What
are they going to say? They went to the playoffs? Boo! No, you didn't.
The Eagles are playing these days. But like when you take a look at the Cowboys example, do you? And we're guessing here, so this is kind of fun because I don't think either of us have the right answer. But like they know what they sell. And it's like being a Cowboys fan. It's not championships. They would be winning a Super Bowl, winning a playoff game would be an outstanding outcome for them. But that's not exactly what they sell. They sell Cowboys, the Cowboys fan, and Jimmy Jones got that figured out. That selling a Cowboys fandom is different than selling a Super Bowl championship.
And so maybe we would venture to say that the Dallas Cowboys exist not to win football games.
Right.
They exist to create fans of an organization that will hold fast to an unrealistic belief, no matter what.
Yeah.
Because they want to be America's team.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying that's good or bad or right or wrong. So but I can tell you one thing that people inside the organization know. Now maybe players don't know this, but I think the inside the corporate knows this. I bet they're not. If you and I can sort of infer that from the outside, and you work there, I can guarantee you can infer that. We're just selling fans, baby. That's all we're doing. We're not selling wins. We're not selling growth. We're not selling community involvement. We're not selling volunteerism. We're not selling we make fans.
Seats. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
That makes it very clear.
That makes it very clear.
Business.
Now, and I'm going to chalk that up to neutral. I'm not telling you it's good or bad or right or wrong. But if we can from the outside see the clarity by which they exist, I think it's very difficult for most organizations, for anyone from the outside to see the clarity by which they exist, except of what were my quarterly or annual numbers, right? So we go back to that singular thing. So if it's hard for the outside that we can't see it, we probably can't see it on the inside either, because I'm even closer to you can't. What is the metaphor like? You can't see the label when you're inside the jar.
I love it.
Like if I'm in the jar all day long and everyone keeps telling me what we say we do on the outside and I can't see that.
Well, and the metaphor kind of begins to hold itself, right? Because it's not exclusive to the Cowboys, right? They know their business they're in, but look at the Raiders, right? They've lived in 3 different cities 4 different times. LA, Oakland, back to Vegas, like they're now in Vegas, and they're also seeking a revenue result irrespective of the championships or the playoff games that they seek to win. And it's that persistent, it's like being a Cubs fan, right? Like just persistent misery over and over and over again is what you sell. And that's that unification. That's the that's the tribe.
And there are a lot of organizations that make enough money to get by, and their company, whether they are willing to admit it or not, is built on the misery that comes with being here and working here, is that it's hard and it's not that great, but we do always get paid. So if you want to work in this place, I guess you just go with it.
You hear a lot of that in like in the banking kind of cultures, right? Where it's going to be 60-hour week. I mean, I was in consulting for 25 years and I just hardwired for certain behaviors that are not in the common job descriptions. And it's like, but I just know I got it. Right. And I don't really, doesn't bother me. It's not something I talk about. It's just something that it wouldn't need to be. I do have a gear that is not necessarily something that people would want to necessarily talk or even aspire to have. But it's interesting when you think about like these kind of natively toxic. So we're kind of getting off track here, but like, how do we with the goal of creating a long-term sustainable organization? We've talked about a couple of cultures that have, the Cowboys, they know what their business is. The Raiders knows what the business is. Just talk briefly about banking. We're talking about real estate as well. Like, I guess it would be helpful to understand that, to know what business you're in. Because like, if you are in, let's say, conventional multifamily, let's for easy terms, let's say you're in your AA space. This is like the Mark Taylor story. You're in A and AA space. That's your business. That is different than being in the affordable space or the C space or the B space. And knowing the business that you're in and how you deliver that value to your customers helps create alignment within the organization. Because if you are in the B space, but you think you're in the A space, you're creating conflict right away. You might want to transition to the A space, but that's going to take time, and it's going to have to be methodical. You can't just talk about it.
Yep.
And so, do
I
you
think
help organizations figure that out too?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love, if as folks that are listening to this, or you're now watching on a replay or whatever it is, I love what you just said. This is where I think most organizations, even ones that they think are doing great, I think you should start, or at least ask yourself, minimum annually, best quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
What business am I in? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you sort of made the assumption that businesses are in the space of sustainable long term. That's not exactly the word you use, but you use something very similar to that.
Yeah.
I know I currently am coaching a business right now that they are in. That's not what they're in. They are in the, how do we increase margin and how do we grow such that we can exit in 18 months? They are in the exiting business. Long-term sustainable growth? No.
Yeah.
How do we do a Q of E? How do we see what our quality of earnings are? How do we make it look as good as we possibly can to get the highest valuation possible to get me up out of here? That's what we're in the business of. Let's go. Now,
it's a really good point. Really good
not
point.
good or bad. I'm great. I don't care what kind of business you're in, but do you know what kind of business you're in? Does your entire organization know what kind of business we're in? And are we, right? I had a call with someone who's in the industry a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to make up a number. I'm going to roughly guess they're in the $20 to $30 million revenue space. And he was like, in the next 2 or 3 years, we got to double. And I said, hey, can I just ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, do you? What's wrong with 65 employees, 30, 40, 50 million of revenue for the next decade?
Yeah.
Like that sounds to me, everybody here seems like they're having a great time. So, and he said, the market won't let me because our clients are highly, highly growth driven. And as they grow, as their number one service provider, we grow. And so we either grow or we die. So we can't do 50 million for the next decade. Great. That tells me that him as a leader and his leadership team and every one of their staff need to know the next 3 years, we're going to add double the amount of employees we have. We're going to go from 60 to 120 to 150. We're going to purchase the building that we're in. We're going to double down on the amount of space. We're going to cascade our leadership across the board. Some of you are going to be tasked. If I know all that now, before we ever get into that space, now I know the kind of business I'm in. Now I know where I'm going. I can adjust accordingly. I can also decide, you know what? See ya. Doesn't sound like a good idea to me, and I don't want that. Thank you. If I'm the CEO, thank you so much. Where do you want to? I'll write you the best recommendation letter there is to get you to go where it is that you want to go.
Yeah.
Do you know what kind of business you're in? I think that's the most important question you have asked so far for organizations to answer. Because if not, I think there's always confusion between the board, the business the board thinks we're in, the business the executive team thinks we're in, and the business that I'm in as a middle manager who's been here for 7 years.
Yeah.
If those three don't align, we are not in the same business. Capacity, expectations, and what fills the gap? Disappointment.
Well, and then get it, want it is what can close the gap.
Absolutely. Can the board and the executive team down to the middle manager have a clear through line to say, I get now where we're going.
Yeah.
I want to get where we're going, and I'm willing to do what's necessary to help us get there.
Do you ever see the look of fear in one of your prospects' eyes when you're having a first conversation about what you solve?
Oh, 100%.
There'll be a reveal.
Now, I will say, by the time if I get in the room and by the time I think I'm probably going to get hired, there's always a little bit of fear, but somebody in that room is like, this is what we need. Otherwise I never get a shot. So it does take a person or two to really double down and go, hey, I'm in it to win it. And I really believe it. And let's go for it. Absolutely. Yeah. But, when I coach people one-on-one, when I'm coaching executives, I literally had a call with an executive yesterday, a partner in an organization. It's actually one of the organizations that's looking to exit. So we're talking through, it's our very first meeting. I'm coaching him. I'm coaching one of the other executives on their team. We're sort of getting to know each other a little bit. And so I'm asking, what do you want? Yada, yada. And he's saying this about life and personal. And so we get going. I'm feeling good about it. He goes, hey, can I ask you something? I actually did a post on LinkedIn about this today. I said, sure. And he said, does it even matter? Does anybody care what I want? Like does what I want even matter? Or do I just need to do the things that I need to do so that everybody else is satisfied And I just know that that's what it's going to be.
Yeah. Wow.
And I was like sort of taken back. Right. I tried to play it cool. Like great question. And my answer was a long-winded. That shouldn't surprise me. But my short answer was, I think it matters immensely.
Yeah.
And I think it's a question that doesn't get asked very often, organizationally or humanly. And I think if that's Rocky's sweet spot, it's the ability to enter in with an organization at the largest level or at the micro level with a single human being. What do we want?
It is I'm taking strategic coach right now with Dan Sullivan. It's one of the things he talks about is, your wants, right? Like we kind of talk about, the polite way is like, what do you need? What do you want? But actually the wants are what actually drives a lot of your behavior. And it's interesting to be clear about your wants, because then a want is a power of choice, right? Whereas a need is thrust upon you by just sheer existence. And so your wants and your power of choice surrounding those wants mobilizes your behavior around those wants. And so the interesting thing that to consider is, like, when you think about those wants, if you don't want it as a leader, I think eventually that reveals itself. It's very difficult. It's just a shitty job, right? And like, if you're not willing to do it for the reasons that you want to do it, then and to achieve those wants, and that includes money. If you're trying to do it for just money, God, it better be a lot, because like
and I'll tell you, even as somebody who works with people who have a lot, and people who have more than most of us have a lot of, they have more than that.
Yeah,
I can tell you what they're not. I can tell you that they are not satisfied. They are no more satisfied than you.
Yeah,
they're not. They are not. And so I think for us to be able to be willing to answer the question for ourselves, what is it that I want? How do I sort of align that? And then as a reminder, I think it's really interesting. Every business that exists because they solve a problem for somebody else that can't be solved without them. Can you and I agree on that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Water bottle companies exist so that I don't have to go to the creek and get the water, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if that's the case, that for all of us to get to where we want to go, need somebody else to help us get there.
Yeah.
Why does your organization, why does your executive team, and why do you believe you're the anomaly that doesn't need help?
Right. Is that now the help part? Like, it's interesting to kind of break down what help means, because it's like, here's my objectives and my goals. Here's the way I've conventionally solved that problem. And I like to think there's kind of 3 ways of solving the problem. There's like, hire more people, outsource it, or maybe get a technology or change your process. That's kind of like, it's oversimplification, but generally I find those are the 3 different answers. And so the help part can be one of those 3 things. The challenge is that conventionally, the first door number 1 was hire more people. And that's kind of that can be the most complicated option.
Correct.
Because of the people, right? Like, technology doesn't have an aspiration, and outsources or vendors just do the job you've asked them to do. And that's it. And they get paid for it. And so, like, it's interesting that the only reason why a business exists is to help you achieve your goals, acknowledging that you're competing against other options to achieve those goals. And those things are good, bad, or indifferent, but they still exist. And so acknowledging that, I had this conversation the other day, that companies often express their gaps. It looks like a job description. Like, it's really hard to hire or to sell to a company that has no publicly posted job descriptions, because it means either they probably have no budget because there's no open positions, and they've got all of their needs satisfied to achieve their goals, because they're not looking to hire people, because that's usually the first thing people do. Oh, I got to hire somebody else for that. Okay, person. And it gets only to a point where you can't fulfill the hire gap, that you seek other alternatives to solve that problem.
I think if we're looking at it from that side, I agree with 100% of everything that you said. I think I want to keep all that intact and just add a comma because you know me, I like to add an and to everything. And I love the way that you described the vendor relationship because you said you can hire a vendor, but they are just there to do the thing you've asked them to do. It's their job. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what I heard you say is, then if I'm an employee of an organization, what do I have that a vendor does not have?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't say a job and do what I expect you to do because a vendor can do that.
Yep.
So then there is something else in between do my job and work here that needs to be addressed, fulfilled, and to be as clear as this measurement is for a vendor. And that's what we qualify as an employee, a part of an organization doing something altogether different.
Yes.
My job, maybe I've never said this before, so you're giving me language. My job is to help you recognize what are the intangible things that your employees bring outside of their capacity to do their job like a vendor so that you actually create an organization.
This is to soak for a second. This is really powerful because we don't think of those things that way. Like we might think of an employee as a catch-all, but a vendor plugs a hole. But it's the intangibles and the willingness to do more than what's just been prescribed, to seek to solve ways to better the situation. That is intrinsic in an employee hire because they do want to be part of that bigger mission. I think what's interesting to think about the employee relationship and the vendor relationship, because the vendor has employees too, right? But they have a mission to serve that vendor, to serve what that vendor sells. So if it's painting walls, then an employee can paint a wall, but a vendor can also paint a wall. And you would hire them but it should be, this is the part that I need to reconcile a little bit, is that choosing a vendor to paint that wall could solve a problem where you're relieving that employee to do other things that are higher order for the organizational mission and vision. I just wrote about this today and I want to change it already. And so because I think of things, I'm a bit math, but the mission and vision and objectives, because I kind of, in this one paragraph in this post I put out today, I kind of threw it in as a throw in. And then there'll be a little bit, if you outsource to a vendor, and then they'll be able to do some of the other stuff they want them to do. But them being available to do some of the other stuff you want them to do is the point that you're talking about. Because it's those other things that you want them to do that create more value than outsourcing the painting job to the vendor.
So what we're saying is your employee has an inherent value outside of their ability to perform the task that is included in their job description and roles and responsibilities, because that is the lifeline, that's the blood flow of our living organization. So if they do not know, the individual does not know what their inherent worth and value is outside of their ability to paint the wall like everyone else, why do we have them? Let's just hire a painter who only cares about painting. Yes. And to me, that is what we've historically called personal development, soft skills, woo-woo. We don't have time for. No, we're talking about the fundamental difference between an individual who performs tasks with no heart and an individual that recognizes they have inherent value as a human being. And that value is, in fact, the differentiator and the catalyst to our growth quarter over quarter, is because we have tapped into people doing the job that we have been paid as a company to do in a way only they can. And that purpose collectively gives life and breathes life into a living organization.
And gives you multiplying returns in multiples versus it's the everybody rowing in one direction.
Which is why we have a methodology called the influence appraisal, where it's an assessment we take people through to assess where am I at and what am I doing and what does it look like. And the title of that keynote is called the ROI of you.
Wow. Okay.
Because if you don't know what that is, I can't tell you what your quarterly growth is going to look like.
Yeah. Well, We landed in the right
We
spot.
landed the plane. Listen, we landed it where we need to land it. I'm gonna have to go get back in my plane and think about this for a while, because I feel like we did something here. But
yeah, I just sent out 6,000 emails that I've got to like update. This is really powerful. I think this is the piece that, the why effect is and then the thing is that if you are seeking, a multiplier returns on your FTEs, recognize that a vendor works for somebody else, for someone else's mission, vision, purpose, and your people work for your mission, vision, purpose. So while a vendor can paint the wall, they're going to paint the wall in a way that matches their mission, vision, purpose for that organization and their person. Your people are going to paint the wall to match your vision, mission, vision, purpose, and their person. And it's okay for those to be out of alignment. It's not okay to think they should be in alignment naturally.
Hey, see you guys. It's been a great show. We'll catch you guys next time on that. Yes.
Totally.
My answer to that is yes. And because all the intangibles that you can't see in the paint are the value if we need an employee to do it. I remember it every time I walk by. I wipe it off when it gets dirty. I'm fascinated by it. I'm energized being in the room because I helped do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. So there are needs for vendors. There are needs for vendors to do things that are driving tasks to get out of the way, so that maybe we're going to hire someone who's going to paint the walls, but our team, we're going to redo the front garden all by ourselves, because we see it every day. And it's the first thing that every person sees when they come to our property. And it's the number one thing that's recognized, so that, you know what, when someone goes in and goes, man, the front of this place is beautiful. Thank you. We've worked really hard to do that. As a matter of fact, it's the one thing that we do that our vendors don't, because that's exactly the experience we want to create. Not just when you walk into our leasing office, that's the experience we want to create everywhere.
Interesting. Wow.
I just signed my lease.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's powerful. And I think that's, and this might come from my background just as a career consultant, just to kind of like divide things into three different options, but not really, consulting was a really, really valuable experience for me. But the one thing I did miss out was being a part of an organization end to end. Right. We were in and out 2 years, that kind of thing. And even the consulting organization itself, that's pretty transactional versus like some wholesale.
Yep.
This is valuable. And so, okay, so we are wrapping up. We're hitting the hour. We'll kind of get the last piece here, is that when you're thinking about your journey, I'll try and tie this together, your journey and your awareness about yourself and your unique abilities.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of put a box around that. What's the piece of advice that you would give a younger Rocky, someone else who's coming in the organization, with respect to yourself, like, your understanding of yourself?
Yeah.
Piece of advice you would give somebody starting their career?
Please spend time discovering a language for who you actually are.
Okay.
I wish that earlier on in my career, I would have been and it's hard to sort of use me because it's both and. I wish this, and it was also my job, so it's kind of a conundrum, right? But like the ability to be able to recognize who I am and the value that I bring. And I think anybody out there listening, the greatest thing that you can do is have the ability to go into your organization and have a general idea about what is that intangible value you bring outside of painting the wall. Why you? What is it? And you don't have to have it perfect. Actually, as a matter of fact, you're never even going to get it right. But you can get it clear and clearer in what those things are. And so I think I wish I would have recognized that I had an inherent value outside of my performance, that was enhanced by my performance, not the other way around. Maybe that's what I would say, is that my value exists and is good, true, and beautiful, and can be enhanced by my performance. Not, I have no value until I perform, and my performance is what gives me value. That is not true.
I think that, and as a takeaway on that comment and trying to figure out, the language around who you are, I've seen reports that more and more of prompts going into GPT are about personal discovery, are about relationships, are about that self-discovery of language, because it's difficult to do that in public. It takes time. It takes language, and often it's very scary.
That's right.
And so, I mean, as a prompt for a prompt, if you're seeking to solve this problem, it could be something as easy as opening up an anonymous session on a GPT,
Yep.
just working this statement so
That's
you
right.
can learn that language.
And then I would say,
Important.
and I would say, and then step 2 is if you start there, go find a human being and practice.
Yeah. Wow. Rocky, thank you so much today.
Appreciate you, my man.
If you're listening on the podcast, you can hit like, subscribe. Those are fantastic. If you're listening to this live after the fact, add comments. Both Rocky and I will get it, and we'll respond. Thank you so much, Rocky, today. There's a big, huge lift in this conversation. I got a plane ride today. That's going to be scrolling around just thinking about this.
Love it. Love it.
Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for the enlightenment, for freeing people from their convention and just driving self-purpose in everybody you speak to. It's outstanding.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right. Take care, everyone.